So across the history of this channel, I've mentioned my favorite movie, Good Times, a good number of times. So today I thought I'd change up the formula a bit and just focus on this movie and explain why it means so much to me, as well as the history of this movie and who made it and who's behind it, because I certainly think that this movie deserves a lot more attention and credit than it originally has right now. So this movie was directed by both Josh and Betty Safdie, who grew up in New York and fell in love with the film at a very young age. In fact, when their parents got divorced, their father actually showed them a scene from a movie of two characters getting divorced to help them better understand what was happening. So they certainly do have a very deep connection with film, and that's something really nice to see in artists. Now, them growing up in New York and having this appreciation and interest in film, they decided to make their own home movies when they were teenagers.
Yeah, literally they were. That's how they became filmmakers. Yes. It's quite a story.
Yeah, no, our dad basically locked us in a closet with a camera, and it was like his way of like babysitting in a weird way.
And these home movies were basically them going around the city and filming different aspects and things going on. And it certainly leads them into their style of having a very documentary, realistic, authentic feel to them. We're greatly inspired by Martin Scorsese and most notably Taxi Driver, and certainly a nice style to fit their main themes of their movies, especially Good Time, considering that a lot of their movies do take place in New York and aim to be very gritty and real. And in 2014 they released their movie Heaven Knows What, which I would say would be their first major stepping stone in their career, as this movie attracted the attention of Robert Pattinson. No, I haven't seen Heaven Knows What, but from my understanding, I understand it did have some mixed reviews when it came out. I'll definitely watch it later on to get a feel for it myself. But the important thing here is that a single still of this image really managed to resonate with Robert Pattinson, which prompted him to write an email to the Safdies explaining that he wanted to work with them. And this email that he wrote and the way that he phrased certain things and what he was asking was very fitting into the way they imagined a certain character would be acting. And eventually all of this led to the character writing of Konstantin Nikas, Robert Pattinson's character in Good Time.
And I received an email from Rob Pattinson basically saying like, hey, I don't know why, but I feel this innate connection to you. He literally said to us, like, listen, whatever you're working on next, I want to be a part of, even if it's catering. And, you know, of course that's a romantic thing to say, but it meant something to us.
Now, what's interesting to think about with the writing process to this movie is that they put the main emphasis on Robert Pattinson's character, as well as the brother character in this movie, Nick, go for the actual plot of the movie itself. And what I mean by that is they certainly let these two breathe and just kind of play off each other, and that dictated the writing of the story.
Writing the character background was almost harder than writing the screenplay. And
you banged out like 3 different scripts.
Yeah, there was a lot of versions. I would send Rob a script and I'd be like, actually, hold on, I'm gonna send you a new draft, and like 5 days later it'd be a completely new script.
Apparently this movie went through a series of different drafts before they got their final product that they were happy with, and I think that's just such a great idea because it really allows the characters to define themselves in such a great way, not to mention the style, tone, and personality of the entire film. So with all that being said, and you now understand the Safdie brothers and the story going up to this movie, I think it's about time we start to break down and analyze certain parts of this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, I would definitely recommend you stop right now and go see it and come back later. Now to start off, I want to talk about the technical aspects of this movie, and this is something I brought up earlier in this video, but the way that this movie is filmed and the presentation is just so incredibly striking and perfect for the story and themes and environment that they're setting the story in. I really do love the look of this movie. A lot of this movie is a lot of handheld and very close up and very claustrophobic, which in turn really does a great job of making this movie feel so incredibly authentic and real. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it goes again into that theme of making the movie feel more as like a documentary. Now, a particular scene comes to mind when I'm thinking about these aspects, and that is the very first scene of the movie. Here, Benny Safdie's character Nick is sitting in his therapy session, and his therapist is asking him a series of questions. Now, just like a lot of scenes in this movie, this scene is filmed very close and up to the characters, but for the most part in the beginning of the scene it's very calm and focused. As the therapist asks more questions, we begin to learn more of Nick as a character, and the scene certainly does do a good job building a certain uneasiness and uncomfortability to it. But it's important to note when Connie enters the scene, it becomes very chaotic and it zooms in on him in a very anxiety-inducing way, and everything from the close-up to the cutting becomes very intense and chaotic. And then the two of them leave and get on the elevator, and it shows what kind of relationship slash dynamic the two of them have.
Fuck Grandma Nikki. It's just you and me. I'm your friend, right?
I really love the way that this scene is visually presented, because not only do we get to feel for Nick's character, but also Connie's character, as well as the dynamic between them, and it's just communicated so incredibly well. Another thing that I really love about this movie would be the soundtrack composed by One Tricks Point Never. The music in this movie certainly has a very synthy 80s tone to it. but there are a lot more chaotic composures to the score that really make it feel chaotic in nature, which is perfect for this story. But something I really want to praise about this movie is how it decides to incorporate and not incorporate its music throughout its certain scenes. For instance, a great example of this movie where it decides to not incorporate the music would be the bail bond scene where Connie tries to get Nick out of jail. The lack of music really allows you to absorb the stressfulness and chaotic nature of this movie as characters are over talking each other and emotions are raising, and the stressfulness and anxiety that Connie is experiencing over this.
Sorry, Mom. I'm sorry.
Calm down.
No, of course. Mom, please listen to me. Just, I'm at a legitimate...
¿Qué va a hacer con eso?
There are also some really great parts of this movie where it decides to use a really ethereal tone to achieve its effect. Like certain scenes where the camera is following vehicles throughout the city that really just manages to create an overall atmosphere to the scene. Now, the discussion and choice to include and not include music throughout certain scenes is something I've talked about, and I feel like I should expand upon it more in this review. How music is used can certainly lead to a lot of different effects for a certain scene, and I really feel like any time a director has the self-awareness not to include the music certainly leaves it to be a lot more impactful later on in scenes when they do decide to use it. And it certainly can be a good deterrent to determine whether or not the scene is posing valid emotions or it's being manipulative with its score, and I think this movie does a really great job of balancing that out. Speaking of creating atmosphere, the side characters in this movie definitely deserve a mention. The side characters in this movie that are introduced throughout the course of the film do a really great job with help building up the authenticity of this movie, and are all so incredibly memorable and impactful no matter how short they show up on screen. For instance, this bail bonds officer is not an actor, he's a real bail bonds officer in Queens, and even he is able to have an impact on this movie and really manages to stick out in my mind when I think about this film. Something that is really impressive about this movie is just how it's able to show certain bits and pieces and communicate so much information in just such an incredibly short amount of time. It really helps you to give a good idea of what the situation of this movie is and what kind of people Connie is dealing with and his kind of situation in life as well. This one short scene in the beginning of the movie does a really great job of establishing the entire dynamic that the three characters in the scene have with each other. The fact that Connie is going to this woman right after Nick gets locked up begging her for money and sees her as someone that he can easily manipulate, and the fact that she constantly defends him and justifies him being there and says she wants to hang out with him, and the fact that the mother character in this scene is able to just tell him of how much of a negative impact he is on her daughter. The following scene in this movie does a really great job of showing how manipulative Connie can be and how he takes advantage of people and how he views this woman as someone to get money off of and come to in times of stress. This is a very good scene to showcase a lot more of Connie's psychopathic tendencies, as he's just constantly trying to guilt trip and manipulate and lie to this woman to get money off of her. And the fact that when she starts bringing up other commitments that he's made and things she wants to do with him, he starts to guilt trip her, manipulate her as to thinking about anything else. It's also a good time to mention that the visual element throughout this scene is also incredibly striking, especially with how the vibrant colors and lights are introduced in this scene, and it's just so incredibly memorable to me. It really feels like the characters are being bombarded with this neon light throughout the entire movie, and it's a constant motif throughout the film. It's just a really great stylistic choice throughout this movie, and I want you to think about that as we continue to talk more about this review. Now, the actual structure of the movie in and of itself is also something really important as to why this movie means so much to me. This movie forgoes the typical 3-act structure of a film and really just any other kind of aspect to a movie that you would expect in terms of the story structure. And in turn, that makes this movie feel a lot more intense as you're really just sitting with Connie and his emotions and what he's going through as different situations arise and how he deals with them. Now, going back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of the side characters to this movie, my favorite side character in this entire movie and the one I feel talking about the most in this review would be Ray, played by Buddy Duress. Now, all the way from the very beginning of his introduction, this character is able to make quite an impact. Now, for a little brief history on the actor Buddy Duress, he is a very Safdie Brothers-esque character in real life. He's had plenty of run-ins with the law, and he actually used substance throughout his life, and with that background in mind, he's able to bring such a high level of authenticity to this movie. My favorite scene of this character, and one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, is the scene in which he's recounting the events of the day before with his trip on substance. And what makes this scene so incredibly visceral and engaging to me is the paranoia that he's able to portray in this scene. He does such a great job of communicating that throughout the story his mind is racing and how he's recounting these events and his panic that he's ensuing, especially to the climax of this particular scene, which really manages to stick out in my mind.
It's not far, and I am not going back to jail. So I just looked down at the pavement and just jumped.
Another very important scene in this movie involving this character would be the actual climax of the movie. Here Connie tries to make a break for it but eventually gets caught by police, and Ray starts climbing the building in an attempt to escape. He eventually falls and plummets to his death, and here we get a really great powerful shot of Connie's face as he recounts all the events that happened in the last 24 hours and how he had an impact on them, and all the pain that he caused and everything, and just all getting caught up to him all at once, and how if events played out differently it could have been Nick in that position instead of Ray. Which brings me to my final segment of this review, the character writing and character in and of itself of Connie Nikas. Now Robert Pattinson has described his character as a romantic psychopath, which is such a fitting description of this character. First off, he has a lot of very noticeable traits as a psychopath. He's very manipulative, very good at lying and playing with events and making them fall out into his favor. He's also very good with coming up with a lot of very convincing stories on the spot.
Cops outside my dad's room.
There's not supposed to be any prisoners on 5. They're supposed to be on 6.
Supposed to be on 6? Hey. Well, something just scared the shit out of me, man. I'm losing my mind. I've been here 48 hours straight.
His view on the world and how he fits into it is certainly a very interesting peek inside his character.
I think something very important is happening, and it's deeply connected to my purpose. And I think that you are somehow connected to it as well.
Now, a better way to examine his character would be through the lens of his relationship with his brother Nick. The way that Connie views himself is sort of as a Masonic figure who's eventually going to be able to be the person to save Nick from all his unhappiness and give him everything he wants. And it's very important to emphasize that Connie does genuinely love his brother, but it's also very important to notice that this all just plays back into his image and his ego and what he thinks of himself. I mean, literally the first thing that we see him do in this movie is pull his brother out of therapy from getting help that he so desperately needs because he believes he's the only person that his brother needs in his life. The bank robbery scene in this movie is certainly very interesting to view his character and their relationship, because right after it's done, Connie starts building up his brother and saying that he couldn't have done it without him and basically praising him with how much he was involved with it. But in all honesty, Nick either just stood there or was kind of a mild annoyance to Connie, and in all honesty, Connie would have probably been better off doing this himself. But it's important to note that he brought him along because he wanted to build up his ego. His brother's ego, not himself, but also certainly that as well. He wants to make it feel as if they're just both in this together and that they can do something together and that they're working together and that they're the only people they need in each other's lives. Which is ironically the event that gets Nick put in jail. And this brings me back around to the shot that I was talking about earlier, in which he just fully realizes how much of a negative impact he has on not only Nick's life but everybody who he's met during this past time. Everything is just catching up to him all at once, and it's just such a mesmerizing scene. And then it transitions into the ending of the movie where Connie just owns up to his mistakes so that Nick can be free and get the help that he so desperately needs to get out of this very negative headspace. And the ending to this movie is also very moving and powerful. It's kind of bittersweet because the brothers do truly love each other, but for the time being, or maybe even just permanently, they need to be away from each other for the sake of Nick. I love the way that how the song is written and the way that the song is used. It's just so incredibly memorable to me. And here's Nick attending one of his therapy sessions and hopefully getting out of the negative headspace that he's been in for such a long time, and hopefully being able to ward off any negative influence that Connie was on him. Now, if you can't tell, this is certainly a very gritty, emotional, authentic movie, and I just can't wait to recommend it to everybody. If you love this movie, then please check out some of the Safdie brothers' other works. I think that both of them are both very important voices in cinema today, and I can't wait to see what they do next together. And this one gets a 10 out of 10.